Hey, this is Dr. Vincent West, Medical Doctor, FANTASM Podcast. Got one of my favorite vocalists ever today. We've got Kevin from Roxx Gang, and we're going to be talking about the Perris reissue of the Voodoo You Love. And Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, man. Doing great. I was down in Tampa, actually, in December. So
Pretty cool city.
Yeah, man. Went down there to see Tom Brady. Wanted to see him before he retired, so that was pretty cool. Got to watch him flush the Saints. It was pretty cool. So,
good weather.
Yeah, man. Great weather, great city. So, how did the Voodoo You Love back in the 90s, like as far as originally when you guys were recording this, how did all that come to be after the first album?
Well, there's all kinds of misconceptions about the Voodoo You Love. After we put out our first album, Things You Never Done Before, on Perris Records, and the Voodoo You Love started out as a demo project. We were demoing all our songs for the second Virgin release. But in the meantime, Virgin decided they were going to put us out on their subsidiary, Charisma. We weren't real pleased with the way they'd handled the first album, and we thought if they were going to put us out on their subsidiary, that was a no-go for us. We negotiated a release, but those songs were recorded probably a year after the first album.
Okay.
They didn't get released till '95 because in the interim we signed with CBS and a development deal, and then CBS got a major overhaul. The people we were working with got fired, and so the album never came out on CBS. And that was also at the advent of grunge, and we just had the rug pulled out from under us like so many other bands.
Sure.
And we finally found a home at Perris Records years later, '95, but the album had really been sitting there for a couple of years. And another thing people don't realize is, in the meantime, the band had gone through a complete personnel change, but in actuality, the Voodoo You Love was recorded by the same band that did Things You Never Done Before. But by the time it was released, there was a new lineup, and that lineup's picture appeared on the album. The guys who are on the album, whose picture are on the album, don't even play on the album except for two songs, Time Bomb and Thick as Thieves, were added to the existing recordings. So a lot of people, don't realize that it's the same lineup as Things You've Never Done Before.
So, I love the first album, and then, I thought you guys were going to blow up. Saw the No Easy Way Out video on MTV, and I was just like, fucking ran out and bought the album. As far as for you, because it seems like it happened to a lot of my favorite bands, it's like, all the grunge wave hit, and they started just dime storing every band that I loved.
Yeah, I can remember when we were recording Things You'd Never Done Before at the Enterprise in Hollywood, California, and I can remember my guitar players were, recording solos, and I was sitting in the lobby of the studio watching MTV, and there was the first Nirvana video and the first Soundgarden video, and I had no idea about it. We were done before we even started. It was just Roxx Gang has always suffered from some bad timing,
right?
And had we been signed a couple of years earlier, my band, we were dirt poor, and we didn't have the money to move to California like a lot of bands did.
Sure.
And therefore we didn't get signed. We probably could have got signed a couple of years earlier. That would have made all the difference in the world. I think the band would have been, I think we would have made a way bigger bang. But
I love the band.
As it was.
It's like so many great stuff, and it just seems like all of that stuff came in. And what I think's funny, and I wanted to ask you about this, It's funny to me how, and again, if you like the guy, I'm not trying to be offensive, but like Dave Grohl, that guy's fucking everywhere, and it's like, dude, you were marketed just like the hair bands that you made fun of in the Year of the Punk Broke video thing that you did. He did this Year That Punk Broke thing that he did with Sonic Youth, and they're like making fun of all that stuff, and it's like your band got marketed more than the stuff you were making fun of, like even making fun of like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that.
Right.
But even smaller bands like Poison, who was big, but I mean they killed like Everything I Love, and they have like no remorse about it, and the guy's on like fucking Super Bowl ads, and it's like you're like one of the biggest media whores on the planet, and you make fun of music that I love, and you were marketed more than any band. Like they just drop like every band in the whole scene that I loved. So
yeah. Well, I was never a big fan of Nirvana or Foo Fighters, but they got a couple songs. I try not to. I don't know. I got nothing good to say about that.
Oh, dude, yeah, exactly.
Girl, I agree with you completely. I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Like, I mean, Everything I Love just disappeared overnight because I was like 15 years old and I'm listening to all this stuff, loving it, and then it just disappeared. It literally disappeared overnight. And
it did. It did, and we were. Roxx Gang was screwed, man. We were poisoned. Man, we had everybody telling us you're going to be the next big thing, and we were so psyched. And Roxx Gang worked for a long time. Roxx Gang was around in Florida for several years before we got signed.
Wow.
And it was a big disappointment, to say the least.
Oh, sure, man. I hate it for you. I love the band, like I said before. As far as, did you all do, for the first album, did you all get to at least do some touring and enjoy that for a little bit? Or?
Yeah. I got to at least live out some rock and roll fantasies there for a while.
That's good. I mean, the second album's great. I always loved the second record. As far
I
as...
actually prefer the second record.
Yeah, it's great. Great album, man.
When the first album came out, a full half of those songs, 5 of the 10 songs were Roxx Gang had a history. We had a completely different lineup before, things you never done before. Our guitar player died in an accident.
Oh my God.
And it took 2 guitar players to replace him. And everybody got replaced except me eventually. And half the songs that are on things you've never done before were written before that lineup gelled. I forgot what you even asked me.
Oh, just about, enjoying some success on the first album and then the transition to the second one.
So we'd been around for a while, and we were slugging away, and we were finally getting national attention, and everything was looking so good. And Beau Hill produced our first album. He'd done Rad,
sure.
Kicks, Alice Cooper. Nigel Dick produced our first video. He'd done the Guns N' Roses videos, the early Guns N' Roses videos. And everybody in the press was telling us, you're going to be the next big thing. And it was heartbreaking when grunge took over like that.
Yeah, and it's the reason that I brought that up, and I wasn't trying to put you on the spot with that, but for me, as a fan, it was like they pulled like the biggest heist in the world, and then they not only were the bands that seemed unapologetic about it, but it's like they got marketed tenfold over bands that I loved.
Yeah. What are you gonna do, man?
Right, it's crazy. Yeah, it's completely crazy. And I bet it was crazy for you to just watch the shift like that, because it seems like it happened overnight. Like the fucking sun's setting, the moon comes out, and then it's done. It's like, what happened?
I mean, program directors at radio stations were just like, all those bands were just thrown in a box. We're not playing these anymore. We're playing this. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as far as
Dave Grohl,
yeah, man, I just
God
don't
love him. He's had some trials and tribulations himself. So.
Well, it's not even just him, but it just seems like all of it, like all of that stuff got Alice in Chains, all of that stuff. It's everywhere. It was just like, I remember going into like a record store, because I used to work at a record store when I was, a teenager, and I remember trying to go in there and find bands I like. It's like, oh, we didn't get that, but we've got 30 copies of Soundgarden and 30 copies of Mudhoney and all this crap. I was just like, I don't want this.
Well, to be perfectly honest, it didn't help that a lot of my peers, a lot of the 80s, however you want to call it, glam metal, hair bands, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
I never considered Roxx Gang a hair band. Yes, there may have been members in the band that had big hair. It was the times.
Sure.
I mean, Bono had a gigantic super mullet, remember? It was
sure he did.
The 80s, everybody had big hair, regardless of your genre. But my glam roots, like I said, we go way back before. When Roxx Gang started, there was no Motley Crue. There was no Poison.
Right.
My glam influences were like the New York Dolls and Mott the Hoople and T-Rex and
sure.
David Bowie and the gritty American stuff like Iggy and Lou Reed and by the time we made it, there was a lot of people that thought we were kind of jumping on that glam bandwagon, when in fact we'd been doing it, and we've been doing it in Florida. And let me tell you, brother, this is a place where, like, Leonard Skinner, Southern rock, like, people didn't know what to think of Roxx Gang when we came out.
Sure.
They thought we were a bunch of transvestite junkies,
Right.
And it just so happened that by the time we got signed, preceding the time we got signed, that all that hair metal blew up. But, like, I never really felt a strong kinship to a lot of those bands, and it didn't help them. And it did help the grunge scene take over, because that a lot of those hair metal bands, I mean, it got silly, man.
It did.
Like, there was people dressing in skin-tight clothes that did not need to be skin-tight clothes.
Right.
There was bands, like, look at Twisted Sister. They look like a bunch of New York truck drivers.
Yeah,
to me, they look like clowns,
Right, exactly.
All these guys, Kevin Dubrow and John Dokken, were wearing wigs,
Right.
It got silly.
It did, and it, for me, you guys were always like, because Thin Lizzy's my favorite band. I'll just like good rock music, and
yeah, I love Thin Lizzy.
Yeah, so I just thought, get the first albums, like, wow, this kicks ass. But yeah, I mean, I liked a lot of that stuff and whatever you want. But the funny thing is, a lot of the bands that I was into, like Roxx Gang, were never big. Like, I don't remember Pretty Boy Floyd ever being big. I don't remember, like, any of the bands that I liked never seemed like they were ever, like, huge, like any of the bands. And I grew up in Florida, so it's like, it was weird because you're right, it's a lot of Southern rock, it's a lot of country, it's a lot of whatever, and I'm still in Florida. I'm over on the Pensacola side, so we're neighbors, but far away neighbors. But yeah, it's like, I never understood any of that. And then the worst thing was, to me, just getting to the music, I didn't like the grunge stuff. And then the post-grunge stuff, to me, was even worse. And it's marketed tenfold. Creed, I never liked. I never liked Stone Temple Pilots. I never liked any of that stuff. I just wasn't into it, And
yeah, it was a dark period for music, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, man, it was, but it's funny because everybody gets labeled into a lump box. I was never into thrash stuff. I was never into it.
Yeah, I'm not a heavy metal. When I say heavy metal, I mean thrash.
Yeah, I was never.
I'm not into that shit either. And I mentioned I like the Voodoo You Love is my favorite album is because the first album, that's why I got off track earlier, half the songs were written, and when I first started, basically I was a lyricist, and I was handing my lyrics over to my guitar player, or he was handing me a tune, and I was writing lyrics to the music. And by the end, as we toured after Things You've Never Done Before, and by the time we started to record, or write the songs, I should say, for the Voodoo You Love, I myself was maturing as a songwriter, and I was coming up with not only the lyrics and the melody, but I was starting to contribute to the music. Now, I love Things You've Never Done Before, but there are songs on that album that are a little... there's songs like Live Fast, Die Young, for example, that they're more in the metal groove, a little more than I felt comfortable with.
Okay.
I always wanted, I just told you my influences,
Sure.
I always wanted to have a rock and roll band with a kind of underlying rhythm and blues kind of influence, like a Aerosmith or the Rolling Stones or the New York Dolls,
Sure.
And I think for our second album, I was able to pull it a little more in that direction, a little further away from the metal and a little closer to the, rock and roll.
Definitely. Yeah, the second record, I was going to say it's like Stones or The Who, it's just a good rock record. I can totally see that. Yeah, that's and I love that, love it. My uncle was a huge Who fan, took me to see The Who when I was in like first grade, didn't get to see Keith, unfortunately, but, I got to see the rest of the band. It was really cool. And, yeah, I definitely hear that. I can hear it even a little bit on the first record. I guess we're kind of back and forth, maybe, some of the songs.
Well, there's some songs, Fastest Gun and Ball and Chain, and there's songs that show a little bit of my... I'm a huge blues fan also.
Nice.
And so, I love blues rock. Love Johnny Winter, all those kind of guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the Rolling Stones. And one of the things I love about the Stones is, and I tried to bring to Roxx Gang, was, so many of those 80s bands, every one of their songs sounded so similar.
Right.
Even from band to band. And, like the Rolling Stones did rock and roll, they did blues, they did reggae, they did rhythm and blues, they did psychedelic.
Right.
You couldn't put them in couldn't pigeonhole them.
Exactly.
And I try to bring a little of that to Roxx Gang. I was kind of limited in the fact that I'm not a guitar player, and so a lot of times my guitar players, God love them, would pull my songs a little bit from the intended direction.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into more of a my guitar players were, Wade Hayes was like, into Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen and all those guys. And so my songs would get pulled a little bit, but if you give them a listen, there's songs, like I said, on the first album, like Fastest Gun in Town and Ball and Chain, that, you can hear a blues influence.
Absolutely.
Or a rock blues influence.
So as far as recording the Voodoo You Love, where was all that done in Florida at that point, or did you all do some stuff else?
No, we had, as a matter of fact, we recorded with this guy. Have you ever heard of the Rods?
Oh, yeah. Love them.
Okay, Carl Kennedy, their drummer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he came down to Florida. I have to backtrack a little bit. I said we had a guitar player that passed away in the original version.
Yes.
Well, we were starting to get our stuff together, and Carl was going to come. Carl heard some demo tapes, and he was going to come down to Florida and record a full album-length demo. And the night before he was supposed to come down, Eric, my guitar player, died.
Oh, God,
okay?
Sorry.
So Carl was so cool. He was like, I can't imagine what it would be like if one of my bandmates died. We were all like brothers. The minute, if you guys, decide to continue and you get another guitar player, you call me and I'll be down there.
Right.
So it was a weird time. I always felt it was never a question for me. I wanted to continue, and I thought the best tribute I could give my fallen brother was to, like I said, 5 of the 10 songs he and I wrote.
Right.
And to get them recorded and on an album, I thought was the best tribute I could give him. And so it was really Carl that decided when he came down that we got Jeff Taylor first, and he said, Jeff's great. He looks, he's got a great image, but I think you really need to add another guitar player.
Right.
And so we got Wade Hayes, who is fantastic. Wade is one of the most underrated guitar players of that era. And, had Roxx Gang got the opportunity to be bigger, I think Wade would have been recognized right up there with, the Warren DeMartinis and whoever.
Absolutely.
And so anyways, we recorded this full-length album-length demo. It was called Love 'Em and Leave 'Em.
Okay.
We later released that on CD. Perris did. And that's what got us signed to Virgin. And then when it came time to do the Voodoo You Love, skip ahead now, we went up to Carl Kennedy's studio. It's just outside of Scranton in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that's where the Voodoo You Love was recorded.
Nice.
And so now I'm maturing as a songwriter, and now we're adding saxophones and honky-tonk pianos in a couple of tracks and horn sections, and I was in my glory recording that album.
Another thing, I'm a big Hanoi Rocks fan. I've always thought you guys were in that vein too, which I always thought they were underrated. I hope you take that as a compliment. I love Michael Monroe. I love your voice. And I just thought, same thing, they got pigeonholed, and I think there was so much more there with them as well. Because I love the horn arrangements on the second album and whatnot. Do you know what I mean? Like, as a fan, I hope that's complimentary to you.
I thought when Hanoi broke up, I thought Mike Monroe was going to, when he put out his solo album, I thought he was going to be big, but it never really, big. It never really happened for him.
Yeah.
The other guy, Andy McCoy, I love Hanoi Rocks, but from what I hear, Andy's got some substance problems.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, I love Hanoi Rocks.
But I thought a little bit of tinge of that maybe in Voodoo You Love. I felt like a little bit of,
I was definitely listening to a lot of Hanoi Rocks at that
cool,
time, so.
Yeah. It's a compliment. I loved it. It was another, listen to the record, but it's...
Well, I feel another parallel that can be drawn between us and Hanoi is like, again, we both had that kind of glam look, but we weren't really like Hanoi Rocks, like Roxx Gang. We're not really hair metal band,
right? Right. An unfortunate label. Yep. It's interesting. As far as the second album, did at any point when you got it, when stuff kind of started faltering, and then you've got all the grunge crap happening, so we're like in the 90s now, like full force. Did you ever try getting it reissued again, or try and taking it anywhere, or shopping it around at all? Like pre-Perris?
Yeah, nobody wanted to touch it.
It's fucking stupid. It is. It's. I seriously am not just blowing smoke up your ass. It's fucking stupid. The band is so great, and it's like it just
nobody
amazes
wanted to touch
me.
it. Everybody we were carrying so much baggage because of our look. It just wasn't. No labels were signing anything that had that. You know.
It's like listen to the record. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I agree with I don't want to sound, not to blow my own horn, but I think it's pretty damn good too.
It is, man. It's great. Are you? And I wanted to ask you this, and I hope it's okay. I was just curious. Do you write at all? Do you still write songs, or do you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Once Roxx Gang dissolved, I had a second band, the Mojo Gurus.
Okay.
And I took it in a way more. I went even further into the rock and roll, rootsy, straight rock and roll. There was rockabilly influences,
nice.
There was blues influences, Americana influences, but it was still rock and roll. But
cool.
But the Roxx Gang fans, for the most part, did not like it.
I'll check it out, man. I've got an open mind. I like anything. I think you're a hell of a songwriter.
Well, the second to last, after the Voodoo You Love, we actually had an album that was called Mojo Gurus.
I was about to say, I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
And it was like a 180 departure from the previous Roxx Gang stuff, and it freaked a lot of our fans out. And it was dedicated to all my Mojo Gurus, right?
Sure, of course.
Mojo, blues terminology for, like, you know, your personal magic, like, or whatever, you know. And
sure.
Guru, obviously, is spiritual teacher, so my influences, I consider my Mojo Gurus. The title came actually from, I was a huge Mark Bolan T-Rex fan, and he had that song Metal Guru.
Yeah.
And had there not been a song Metal Guru, there probably would not have been a song or a band named the Mojo Guru.
Right.
But there was an album, there was a Roxx Gang album called Mojo Gurus, and it contained there was a title song, there was a song, Mojo Guru. And after that, there was two more Roxx Gang albums. There was... there was one before it, and there was one after it. The last one was called Drinking TNT and Smoking Dynamite. And, so I've kept the last Mojo Gurus album was called Gone. I kind of knew it was going to be the last Mojo Gurus album. And so the title, I like song titles, song lyrics that have like multiple meanings, or that, like, when different people hear it, they can interpret it in different ways.
Yeah.
And so Gone is like in the rockabilly vernacular, like, you know, man, that chick is real gone. You know?
Right.
Gone, also, you could be gone, like, out of your gourd, you know?
Right.
And then there's Gone, as in adios.
Right.
And so I thought it was an apt title for what I knew was going to be the last Mojo Gurus album. But I still write occasionally. I love writing. It's a little depressing because for me right now, I don't write quite as often because I'll come up with something and I'll think, wow, I got a really good song here. And then it kind of bums me out thinking that, like, nobody may ever hear it.
Right, sure.
I think I will always. I can't stop writing. It's something I love to do.
Right. Hey, as far as I was going to ask you too, the first album, did y'all get to do some touring with that? Did y'all get out there for that record?
Yeah, we did we had the tour bus and the trashed the hotel room, the whole 9 yards.
Who guys were you guys out with? Who did y'all go end up hitting the road with?
We toured. anybody, but we did a bunch of dates with Warrant.
Okay.
Which I didn't think was a great matchup.
Yeah, that's just weird.
We played with Faster Pussycat. We played with Rat. We played with. Oh Jesus! You're talking like 30.
Oh, I know. I went way back on you.
There's a lot of.
I bet the Rat tour was fun. Hopefully, that was a good experience.
Yeah, we didn't do that many dates with them. We did do a couple of dates with them. It was fun.
They seem like cool guys. I've never got to chat with any of them, but I always thought they were cool when I was a kid. I love Steven's voice. I thought it's like your voice. It's very unique. There are certain voices of stuff of records when I go listen to them. It's like, no, listen to this and I'll play it for people. I've got friends of mine that are like 10, 15 years younger than me. I'm like, listen to this, and they'll be like, oh wow, that's like nothing sounds like that. It's cool. And it sticks out.
When I first started in little, B-circuit clubs singing cover songs, when I first got into this whole thing, I realized right away, I'm not one of these guys with a fantastic range that can hit notes, in outer space.
Right.
But I also realized that a lot of my idols weren't the greatest singers, and that to be successful in rock or a rock star, you don't have to have a great voice.
Right.
You got to have attitude.
Fuck yeah.
So when I first started singing, there was bands like Black Sabbath and with Dio.
Yeah.
At the time, and I can't even think, but there was a lot of bands there was some high range shit going on, and I was like, look, don't try and imitate these guys. You're going to fail miserably. Like, just be yourself.
Sure, absolutely.
And so even when I interpreted other people's songs, I always tried to sing it with my own voice. And I don't know, for better or worse, that was my modus operandi.
Hey man, like I said, remember buying the first album and was just like, fuck yeah. I was like, I loved it. And then right to the second, it was funny because I was, and I hope this means something to you, I was a fan that was like waiting the next year for the rap. I was like, where did they go? So because I loved it. Like I went right out and got it. Had the vinyl, had the cassette, wore the fucking cassette out of the first album to the point where it wouldn't even fucking play. I've still got the damn thing. Vinyl's got some war stories too.
Mean a lot to me.
Yeah, man, dude. Like I said, I was like, fuck yeah. And at the time, because I was living in Pensacola, where I'm at now, but my aunt was still alive at the time. I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and not a lot of stuff came through there. I didn't get to a lot of shows. And my uncle was real good about taking me to shows when I was like really young. But then as I got older, we would try to go to stuff. But he was a truck driver, so if he wasn't in town, because my mom loved my mom to death. My mom's not in the best of health now, but she just wasn't going to take me to rock shows. That was always my uncle's thing, So I tried to get as much stuff as I could. But yeah, man, I was the fan that bought it and was just like, fuck,
I love to hear it because there's my childhood. There's a lot of darkness there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really talk about this a lot, and I'm not going to get into the details. But my mother was murdered. Okay.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
And I was like 8 years old.
Jeez.
I got a few years older. I think it's why I gravitated towards a lot of the glam bands, because music had always been an escape for me.
Right.
Years following my mother's death, I had a very rough childhood. And music was an escape from my shitty reality.
Right.
And I think I gravitated towards, like, I remember seeing the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars, or Mott the Hoople, or the New York Dolls album covers, and I was like, Bowie looked like a spaceman,
Right.
It was just so out of this world that it, like, I think it was even more of a you know, I was looking for something to take me away. You know?
Absolutely.
And so I decided at a very early age that I wanted to do this. I can remember as a little kid watching the Monkees television program.
Oh yeah, loved it.
And I remember this particular episode where Davy Jones, they were in Paris, and Davy Jones was getting chased all over the Eiffel Tower by a mob of screaming girls. And when they caught him, they just like ripped his shirt off. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
And I wanted to hang out with a bunch of my friends and like a Monkees headquarters and riding a monkey mobile and have screaming girls chase me, you know, like before I knew I had any iota of musical talent, I just was attracted to the lifestyle. You know?
Absolutely.
The clothes and everything. So one of my main goals, though, in music was, and it's kind of it's true. I don't know if it sounds corny or contrived, but I wanted to provide the same escape for other kids that were in a shitty situation.
Well, you did for me. And to get into,
I had.
Well, man, you did for me.
Music had provided that escape for me. I wanted to give that to somebody else. And over the years, I met fans or had read letters to me that kind of confirmed that for me, and that's a bigger reward for me than selling millions of records, you know.
Well, for what it's worth, I was a foster home child up until I was like 5, and then got adopted. Real abusive dad, and a bunch of other bad shit went down that I won't get into. So yeah, man, you did that for me. You gave me an escape. I remember it vividly. I remember specifically going to the mall on a Sunday, skipping church with my buddy. We would never go. Like, his mom was like, so she did stuff at the church. We would skip church, hit the mall, and we bought records. So you totally did that for me. I mean, for what it's worth. So, like I said, yeah. So it's funny how
it does my heart good to hear that.
Yeah, man, the cycle continues. The cycle continues. So it's like, you know, it was great. Like I said, I hate that, because I think the second record, it sounds like it was more. I mean, I love the first album myself, but the second record, you know, for you and even for me as a listener now, I think it was, you know, definitely going in the right direction for you as a writer. But I love the second record, and it's sad to me that like you said, the timing on the whole fucking thing, because that's all it was. You know, you have a time machine, you do it, what, 2 years prior, the first album's out 2 years early. Who knows, you know?
Yep. And on the other, you know, I've had years to reflect on this, and you know, there's another side to it. Also, like, who knows? What if I'd made it big? Like, there's a lot of temptations on the road.
Oh yeah.
I might not be sitting here talking to you. Who knows?
Oh, I know. See, that's the whole other thing. You think about that, all of those bands like that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There are a few bands, you know, that I was never into. And again, I'm not even trying to speak badly, but it's just the truth. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way. There are bands that are still around that I don't know how they're not dead. You know?
And there's other bands. I catch a lot of flack for this, but I believe in it strongly, and I will reiterate it, is that rock and roll is a young man's game. I don't care what anybody says. And if you're in a glam rock band, the window's even smaller.
Right.
Because so many of my peers that started in the same era as I did, that are still going, it's like, they look freaking ridiculous to me. I mean, I've always cared about, I'm in pretty good shape. and I still have all my hair, all my teeth, and everything.
Right.
But you look at some of these guys with their dyed hair and their belly hanging over their skin-tight pants, and they're 60-year-old rockers and stuff, and it's like, just give it up. And in some ways, what happened to us is a blessing in disguise, because to thousands of people, I am forever 28.
Yeah, you are.
That's what the pictures they see of me.
Right.
They never saw me age. And I don't know. And even guys, okay, I worshipped at the altar of guys like Alice Cooper when I was a little kid, the original Alice Cooper band. And, I hate to say it, but look at Alice now. I mean, come on. It doesn't look good.
No, it
Steven
doesn't.
Tyler. Look, I respect the hell out of Steven Tyler, and I think it's fantastic that a guy his age has a physique that he can still wear those clothes, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And he's still writing songs that are aimed at prepubescent girls, and to me, it's kind of creepy,
Yeah.
At least like the Rolling Stones kind of like matured with their audience,
Yeah.
It's Steven Tyler and a lot of these guys, it's like, I don't know, it bugs me seeing old guys. Okay, like I was such a fan of the 70s glam scene. Do you remember a guy named Gary Glitter?
Oh, of course.
Right, Rock and Roll Part 1 and 2.
Yeah, of course.
See, a long time ago, I said, I do not want to end up like Gary Glitter was already a middle-aged guy when he hit it big.
Right.
And he would be wearing these silver sequin pants, and he had a gut, something. It was like, he ended up being a pedophile or something, it turned out. But I've always had that thing where, like, rock and roll, you got to get in, you got to strike while the iron's hot, and then if you have any self-respect, you got to get out.
Well, it's.
Or you have to take your music in a direction and your look in a direction that where it's not embarrassing.
Yeah, man. And again, I was a fan of this band up until Stephen Clark died. I haven't followed the band since Stephen Clark died, but Joe Elliott right now is straight up rocking a wig. I mean, dude, it's bad. Like, it's real bad. Like, it's like a Golden Girls wig. Like, he is straight up wearing a Blanche Devereaux wig. It's like, dude, what are you doing? And
Well, remember when Kevin Dubrow, when he had little squirrely hair, and then all of a sudden one album came out and he had hair down to his rib cage, and Don Johnson all of a sudden had a big. To me, that's so on rock and roll. Like,
yeah, and I hate to do it's Bret Michaels has to be rocking a wig too. The guy looks like, I'm glad.
I don't know what's going on with that.
Dude, he's got to be. That has to be a wig. And I made a joke with my co-host. I was like, we should. Just to boost the podcast, I should just go to these shows and get arrested to run up on stage and pull the wig off. Like, it's...
And even now, like, okay, there are Kiss songs that I like, but I'm of age where, like, my little brother listened to Kiss.
Sure,
okay?
Sure.
It was kind of a kiddie band by the time I was in high school, right?
Absolutely.
Even Paul Stanley, like, you've seen him without his makeup these days, he's rocking a shorter haircut.
Oh, yeah.
But if he goes on tour with Kiss, he's wearing a wig.
It has to be.
It's like, I don't know, man. Gene Simmons, like, he's a grandfather age dude, and he's up there spitting fire, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you something funny, and again, I don't know if you ever knew these guys or whatever, but it's like, I'm happy for the guitarist for Kiss, the dude from Black and Blue, just because I always liked Black and Blue, and Black and Blue never felt like they got any love, so I'm happy that he's making a lot of money. I know he's not aged, but it's like,
what you gotta do.
Man, and everybody trashes that guy, and I'm like, man, if if Kiss offered you a ton of money to get up there and dress and play guitar and pretend you're Ace Frehley, most people are going to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's funny, but
because for reasons that I just explained to you about what rock and roll has meant to me, like,
sure.
You know, rock and roll, man, it's for kids. It's for before rock and roll, there was no music aimed at teenagers.
Right.
There wasn't any. Maybe some Bobby Soxer type stuff, you know. But it was big band stuff, and you know, until rock and roll was the first music that was directly aimed at teenagers, and then this started a whole subculture. Our parents or our grandparents did not understand it one bit. It was like, turn that shit down, which made you want to just crank it even louder. And they were scared by it. They didn't understand it. They thought it was silly.
Sure.
But it's for kids. And the older I get, you know, that's why a lot of Roxx Gang fans, I told you, were turned off by the Mojo Gurus. But I was my second band. But I was like, I got to a certain age, and I was like, I'm too old to sing Too Cool for School. You know?
Right.
I'm too old to sing I Need Your Sex, you know? Like,
right.
It was like, I had to take it. I wasn't ready to quit yet. I still felt I had a lot of music in me, but I had to start taking it in another direction. And I understand, for the Roxx Gang fans, there's a lot of nostalgia attached with when you grew up listening to certain records, you know.
Absolutely.
'Cause I get hounded to death to do Roxx Gang, put the band back together, do a tour, put out one more album. But, like, Roxx Gang's over.
Right.
It was a great time in my life, but it was like, that was me as a young man, you know.
It's funny. I was listening to the first album yesterday, just preparing to do the interview with you. Man, it's like it just transports me to that time in my life. Like I can remember, you know, if I could have the sight and smells with it, it's like being in a fucking time machine. You know, it's such a great record, and it was a great time in my life. I remember being that age, you know. So yeah, I respect that, man, because like we were talking about a minute ago, there's these bands that keep doing this stuff, but it's like, at what point is it time to say, okay, you know, enough, you know?
Right. See. I mean, you told me this, so I don't feel like it's a brag or a boast, but like, you love that album.
I do.
You have great memories associated with that album.
Absolutely.
It brings you to a time where you have all kinds of great memories for a period of your life.
Yep.
You know? And that album's always there to do that for you.
Yep.
You know, but other bands who provided that same thing for you but kept going, like a lot of those guys, all of a sudden they kind of ruin it. It starts to be like, wow, I just really like this guy. You know?
Right.
Look at him now.
Well, and I want to thank you for this too. Thank you for never re-recording the stuff. Like, I don't know why bands think that's. I remember there was like this phase where all these bands were doing that. It's like, why are you re-recording stuff? Like, I want the original record. You want to remaster it? I'm going to buy that all day long. But if don't re-record the songs. I don't want to. I don't want to hear. You know, I don't want to hear that now. You know, now it's one thing if you're, you know, you decided to do a live show, I would be there, and you're up there playing the goods, sure. But I also respect that you don't. But I'm just saying, do you know what I mean? Like these bands, they go in and like, oh, we're going to record. It's. I was talking about Def Leppard a minute ago. Let's do Photograph 2023. No, don't. Please don't. You know. It was because it's like a time capsule, you know. And to me, when you tamper with that, I never understood bands doing that. It's like, oh, we're going to re-record everything unplugged. It's like, no, don't.
Yeah.
But dude, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this today, dude. I'm a huge fan of the band. I hope you had fun chatting with me. I had a blast talking to you, kids. check out anything from Roxx Gang. But definitely check out the Voodoo You Love. It's reissued Perris Records. It's awesome. It's got the Magic Carpet Ride bonus track. Check it out. It's fucking cool as shit. Kevin,
that's an original song too.
That's amazing.
To clarify.
Awesome.
That's not the Steppenwolf classic.
Yeah, there you go. Even better. Dude, it was
rock on, everybody out there. Here's this. Rock on.
Dude, thank you so much for this, Kevin, dude. Huge fan. Thank you for the memories. Thanks for sharing with me, and I wish you all the best, dude. You're the man.
All right, thanks a lot, brother.
Thanks, brother. Take care.